Hello and welcome to the Connect HR Leadership Virtual Summit hosted on Quartz Network. My name is Britt Erler, QN Executive Correspondent. Thank you so much for joining us. Now more than ever, companies are focusing on their employees. They are seeking ways to improve company culture, increase employee engagement, and to attract diverse candidates in their hiring pool. But where do they begin? Providing more insights on this topic, I would like to welcome our executive speaker, Julian Sado. Welcome, Julian. Pleasure to have you here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it, Brett.
Of course, and really excited to dive into this topic today. But before we do so, if you wouldn't mind giving the audience some context about your background and your current role.
Wow. So my background stems from an entertainment industry all the way into the fitness industry into corporate America. And so I left entertainment industry and got into corporate in life insurance sales. And from there, I was mentored by a guy by the name of Jim Rohn, and ended up really focusing on the mind science and human nature, neuroscience, NLP, and really focusing on just what makes us tick as people. And then from there, I ended up consulting and working W-2 jobs on and off, but mostly consulting with over 45 different companies, ranging from medical to life insurance to mortgage. And so I've been really heavily involved in neuroscience and NLP and tying that into leadership roles as they apply today.
Absolutely. And really, there's such a new scope to company culture as a whole and what companies are seeking and the new candidates, and also trying to reshape kind of the vision of where they want the company to go. So based on your experience and what you've seen at your different companies and in the different industries that you've worked with, how important is company culture?
Well, that's a loaded question, because culture is very important, but it's how we mimic and how we advertise our culture is really where the challenge is, right? So there's always a culture. I mean, regardless of what people think, culture is there. When people walk in, they pick something up and they define what that is based off of their perceptions. The challenge is when we're trying to move perceptions, if we're forcing it, people are now more in tune with how they feel. So they feel that push. And when they feel that push, you've damaged the culture. So I think it's very important to understand how to develop a culture, not so much how to word it.
Definitely. So where do you recommend that companies start? Because I think one of the biggest struggles we're seeing right now, especially in this new virtual environment, is this factor of engagement. How do I keep people engaged if they're not sitting in an office, if we're not getting together, socially? What do you believe are some of the best ways to get that kick-started?
It's really about being organic and not having a plan. I mean, that sounds really funny, but the more planning you do, the more ingenuine you become. So when we put process in place, we end up separating ourselves from the process. And that is where the challenge lies. So it's really about being organic. Thinking about what you just said, I think it's really important to understand a 2D environment. The brain doesn't develop what we call a mirror neuron, where people can actually feel empathy towards one another. If I don't feel your pheromones, if I don't see you laugh and smile and have that body language contact, which people don't realize, people pay attention to the hand movement more than anything subconsciously. And so if I just see this and not a talking interaction, then I'm not able to develop that mirror neuron. So that ability to feel connected is really severed. And so it takes a lot of effort to know how to develop that. And it usually happens with small things, not the big things. It might just mean 5 minutes a day, you pick up a phone and call one of your frontline employees and say, look, I don't know you, but I know you work for us. So you've been here for so long. I just want to thank you for that. I have nothing to ask you. I have nothing to gain. I just wanted to let you know I really appreciate you, what I heard so far. I'd love to maybe get some coffee with you one day on a Zoom. Hear what makes you tick, what passions you have, what drives you, what do you want to be? I mean, I know you don't want to work here. Let's be real. No one grew up and graduated high school saying, one day I want to work for somebody and be told what to do. I mean, everyone has a dream. So tapping into that is really the key. And it really is a small thing, a small gesture, 5 minutes a day, one person a day.
Yeah, and I think that's really something we're starting to see is this trend of more transparency and also the sense of humanity as we realize people are really bringing work into their homes and they've got kids that are, having to go to school at the same time. And we're really seeing the pressure being put on people unlike ever before. And so I think it really is just taking those little bits of time to getting to know the people around you, even if it's just to tune in to say, hey, how are you doing? We do team virtual happy hours just to stay connected as much as we can. So I think those are really all great tips for people moving forward. And in terms of, I want to talk a little bit about spiritual leadership, because that's something that's becoming a really common trend right now, especially in the HR space. We're seeing a lot of turmoil. People are going through a lot of different things, good and bad. It's going up and down, especially as we're making it through this COVID wave. how do you keep employees engaged? How do you keep them positive and moving toward the same goal while they're going through all of this around them?
Well, here's my catch to everyone. You can't. And that's the challenge. You can only engage with yourself. You can only motivate you. People mirror what they sense you are. So the more you try to encourage others, you first have to ask, what reflection am I giving? And I use, leaders tend to talk with authority or with concern. We need to do this. We have to do this. And what you're telling people is you need to be concerned. You're not engaged. You need to be happy. You need to be at peace. You need to be a person that and we talk about this. There's new science in 1984 or 94, I should say, discovered that there's 40,000 brain-like cells in the heart. And that's actually 5,000 times stronger than the electromagnetic waves in the brain. So people pick up what we call in the spiritual world frequencies or energy from people. And when you have that feeling, it's that gut that says this person's either genuine, ungenuine, and those are things you want to recognize. This is not about teaching others anything. You don't teach people anything. You just be something. And in that being, people start mirroring and mimicking that being. And so that's the key. It's really understanding if you're being a leader in a sense of authority, or if you're being a leader of love and kindness. And I can say that in corporate now, because we use the word spiritual. It is about love. It's about being genuine and caring about someone else. And that's hard for leaders when we're focused on data and process and improvements and also, production. It means to step back and look at yourself.
Yeah, and I can also see it from another perspective. I lead our team here at Quartz, the content team, and I'm a very closed off person in terms of my emotions, right? So it's very hard for me to sometimes express how I'm feeling, or to, as you mentioned, express my love or gratitude for people. It's just not how I've been built, how I've been wired. So for people that are like me, that still have that concern and care for their team, how do you recommend we still make sure that they feel supported and that they feel, yeah, go ahead.
I mean, you hit it right on the head. 70% of the culture is right brain, 30% of left brain, like underwriters versus salespeople, right? You have different types, right? But you're not anything. You're what you choose to be. So you can flip a script if you had to. You can literally be something different if you felt the need to. Right. So the goal is to first be honest with people and let them know how you've been, and then pretty much ask them. It's like the love languages. What makes you tick? Right. Some people get really offended with a gift card of $25. I've been working, every day over time, and you give me a $25 gift card? Really? So some people might say, hey, just the phone call saying, hey, I know you've been working overtime. You got 2 kids at home. They haven't been in school. You've been navigating this business with me. Thank you. You know what I mean? I just really want to say, I really appreciate that. You had no reason to do this. I just want to thank you for that.
Right.
And and then just have a conversation, but have the conversation, you be open first. Right. I haven't really been struggling a lot as much as some, but here's some of the things I have been struggling with. Then they tell you what they've been struggling with. But when you ask people how they're doing and you don't tell anybody how you're doing and you're just great, their answer to you is, I'm great. And you never really get to the core. So the core is really understanding how to be open and to let people know and find out what makes them tick first.
Yeah, I think that's such incredible advice. And just, as you said, taking meaning, with everyone around you as opposed to a gift card. Now, depends on where that gift card's to, because if it's Amazon, I will take it. But no, I see what you're saying, really, taking that extra time to get to know somebody and really putting meaning into it. At the end of the day, it means a lot more to people than like you said, just something simple. And I think, what we're seeing today, especially in these teams where half our company, for example, was hired during COVID, it's all virtual. They've never even been into the office. It's how to keep those people connected and make them feel like they're part of a family, right? And not just an organization. So I think that's a great step and good advice for me as well as a leader too, because I think there's a lot of people in that same space. Now I want to shift gears a little bit and talk about diversity, because obviously that's another big trend, a big influx that we're seeing this year, which is incredible, especially in this virtual world, because now companies are able to hire so many more diverse candidates than they would have had they had to hire in their exact location. Talk to me about the importance of that, whether you believe programs need to be put in place, and if they are, the best way to do that.
Well, this one could get me in trouble. You know that, Britt. So just so you know, I'm African American, but I look Hispanic, right? I grew up in East LA, and then we talked earlier, I grew up in Santa Monica, Culver City. My whole family is from Louisiana. My father's from Hawaii. Diversity is very important to me, but here's the scientific conversation about this.
Okay.
The more you use a word, the more you infuse the opposite of it. So the more you fight something, the more you become what you fight. That is across the board logic. So the more I bring up the word diversity, the more I'm making it evident that I'm different than you. So diversity, yes, there is a need for individual diversity and inclusion. There is a need for us to know this stuff. But the concept of going about it has to be in a way that's not insightful of anger, fear, and aggression. So I use in classes, like if I ask you to put your hand up in public and I push on your hand, you automatically push back. And I never asked you to push back, but you respond to me in pushing because you feel me pushing. So instead of focusing on diversity and inclusion, just focus on a few things. Like I ask people, like, if you like, do you like sports cars or SUVs? You might say you like SUVs. Another person might say they like sports cars. You don't care. You don't find there's anything wrong with that. You can say you have a bias towards sports cars. I have a bias towards SUVs. But if I ask everyone to stand up who's ever been hurt by someone that they've cared for, everyone stands up. If I ask somebody to stand up, people stand up if they've ever loved someone and was brokenhearted or felt they needed more money at the end of the month, or was worried about a loved one at one time, or had a health issue at one time, or someone they knew. You see, we all have the same feelings. Right. But instead of looking at the outward appearance, look at the inward person. And that's the key to diversity. It's like not focusing on the outward appearance, but focusing on what we're alike versus what we're not alike. Diversity programs need to not be a product of color, but a product of character. And if we can focus on that, you would see a huge shift. But see, what happens is, I'm from Hollywood. I know, and I worked with some major corporations when it comes to marketing. We use shock and awe to get attention. And then the shock and awe becomes the truth and the norm, when it really is just a form of advertisement of getting attention.
I love that. I think it's such a unique idea because, you know, right now there is so much pressure for companies to implement these diversity programs, but in their heads, they're like, where do we start? You know, how do we make sure we're still getting good candidates, make sure that we're bringing on the right people, and also people that still feel the passion for the company that they're joining on the team for. You know, based on everything you just described there, for a company that's looking to make their first step into developing this program, what do you believe are some of the key areas they should focus on?
Temperament. Temperament is the number one thing. If you're going to start a program with an aggression, it's not going to work. You know, temperament's going to be the key to everything. You know, it really isn't about having to have an African-American run it. It really is about having the right person run it. You know, it isn't about hiring an African-American or Hispanic or an Asian. It's about hiring the right person. And it really goes back to challenging what you're looking at. You know, there's a lot of companies now that are now just disregarding, you know, college. And to be honest with you, I agree with that. You know, you look at experience, you look at character, you look at competency, you look at communication skills, you look at the things that, you know, really, you know, using your own gut instincts of what works for your team. And it shouldn't be someone you always agree with. I think the challenge we're also faced with, we want to find people that make us feel comfortable in what we've already agreed upon. So find people that are going to challenge you with love or with respect and dignity. So like I said, temperament is the number one key. Whenever you force something, it's temporal and it's not genuine. So the goal is to find the right temperament.
Yeah, I think that's incredible advice. And I try to always, you know, surround people that are going to challenge me or say, that's not a great idea, here's something better. I think you nailed it on the head. A bachelor degree can be great in some respects, but at the end of the day, if you have someone who's creative, who's passionate, who has experience in a multitude of areas that can bring so much to the table, that all goes out the window, right? That bachelor's degree means nothing. And I think that's really what we're starting to see this year now more than ever, is companies are finally beginning to realize that. So I think it's a really cool shift.
I would love to interject something there, because the Z generation is now in the workforce, and the Z generation grew up with, if I don't like something, I just click reset, start a new video game. So, you know, there's a really tricky substance here. And if I can send you a PowerPoint on this, but how video games keep the attention of people is a psychological game that they play. It's just, there's certain triggers that you want to hit at certain milestones within the video game, or people shut down and they just get rid of it. They don't like it anymore. So they have done a lot of studies, and they worked with UCLA and all kinds of sciences on what triggers the brain to make that dopamine populate into the brain when they're engagement. Now, your Z generation coming to the workforce has the same concept, because whatever we trigger becomes a habit. And so we start looking for the same types of things in our life to make those triggers occur in our brain. So jobs have to have the same concept around employees. You know, Ford hired people that didn't know anything about cars, and he was able to design the best car ever for sale. You have, you know, Andrew Carnegie, who tore down every building he ever had every 5 years and had his employees come up with the ideas to rebuild it and where to put things and how to make things operate. They're the ones that built the assembly line that he had, not him. And I think leaders need to understand that stepping back and letting creativity flow to its fullest without fearing that I'm going to be ridiculed for my side hustle is going to be the key to really building the right employee.
I completely agree. And I think you put it perfectly. You really have to be aware of who it is that you're managing, because you're not going to manage someone who's probably in their 50s the same that you should manage someone in their Gen Z. You just won't, because their personalities are different. What they're looking for in their career is completely different. And I think really being able to identify that and manage them correctly is going to be key. And I think that's also going to be a huge factor in retention and keeping these people on board. What are some insights that you have there as far as making sure that your employees, once they've joined, they're within the company culture, they've got a great career? How do you keep them on board?
You know, one of the funniest things that I did with a company when I was consulting was test groups. Have testers, be willing to fail. You know, scientists fail all the time. They call it science. Pick that up. Understand that only way we figure out things is to fail at it 1,000 times until we get it right. Let these creative people go out there and reward the failure. I know it sounds insane, but put some expenses in the failure, not clarity, and not what we call security. What we've done in corporate is we've asked people to put together proposals for things, how things are going to work, and it has to be right or they're fired. So what happens is the fear is driving the ideas, and there's safety in what's already been done. This is why nothing changes, because we're using the same models we've always used, but now you have a different culture. So those models aren't going to work anymore. So getting money aside for the failure. And when you do that, those people are going to be the ones that are going to market your company. They're going to be talking about what they're creating, what they're developing. And that's your sales pitch right there. That is your branding, is when you have your frontline employees talking about what they're creating at your company.
Absolutely. You learn and you grow from failure. You know, you can't otherwise. And I think another thing you mentioned there that's so crucial is, in order to make someone feel like they're part of a company, they're part of that growth and what it's becoming, is if they've actually been able to implement some of their ideas, some of their creativity and who they are. Otherwise, it just becomes a mundane job for them, you know, hitting the daily task. There's nothing outside of that, and there's no future for them in the company as a whole. So I think that is crucial for people moving forward, really, no matter what generation that employee's in. Absolutely.
It's a great point. I think the retirement community is still coming back to the workforce too. Don't forget about them, because they have a lot of skills, and I think we lean heavily on the new generation and the new technology, but the character and the work ethic and the communication skills that came from, you know, my generation is by far something that needs to be implemented into corporations, and finding some kind of mentorship on both sides. It's equality mentorship, not one over the other. And I think that's an important way to handle new employees as well.
Of course, every generation has something to offer better than the next. You know, I mean, it's just the way of the game. Everyone's got faults, and I mean, I'm a millennial, so I can list many faults of the millennials that we have, but we also bring a lot of our tech savvy, a lot of creativity, a lot of more openness that, you know.
And I dressed in 80s clothing, so we're
All right, you 100% win.
That's right.
And to wrap up our conversation today, I think, you know, the final most pressing point that we're seeing in HR today is recruiting talent. And we see it in our own company here. There is so much talent out there, but there's also a competitive market for companies that are all looking for the same thing. How do you put yourself above the rest? How do you put your company out there into the spotlight and really provide these candidates with a great offering?
You know, it's a really great question. And that's one of the hardest questions to answer, because anything you do is people are going to duplicate, model, and you're going to easily blend into the masses. So you have to really understand that, you know, recruiting starts from the front line. It really does. Your goal is to do everything you can, not just have a referral program, but when you do have somebody who's referred, are you marketing that internally? Are you showing the connection? Are you giving people the visual story of what that looks like? Now, one negative experience hits the average about 1,500 people.
Right.
So you got to know that one bad experience from one employee hits 1,500 people, possibly 800 of those might be looking for a job one day, but they'll never go to you. I'll never go to Taco Bell because of one experience someone told me, and I see Taco Bells everywhere. So you know that word of mouth is powerful. And so that is the key, is understanding your front line is your recruiters. Recruiters are just the deflectors, being able to push who we don't want, but they shouldn't be chasing the good people. The company's responsibility is to make sure that they look good to the people that are already there.
Right.
That is what's going to drive the recruiting.
I love that. I think that is really, and I don't think many companies look at it that way, but you have to make the people that are currently there happy. And then people joining on, they see that reflection. Recruiters are always going to be there, but at the end of the day, I could list off 10 companies right now that I have great company culture because I have friends that work there, or,
Exactly.
I've seen reviews online, because that's everything now. So it's so true. Worry about the people you have there first, and then that automatically is going to attract even better people to come in and work for you.
In sales, they call that third-party validation. So your employee becomes your third-party validation. People always believe that person if they're not trying to sell you. So the people that just work there, they're not trying to sell you because they have a job. They're not getting commission to go out and sell. They're just talking about what they love about where they are.
Right.
That's it.
Right. It's free. You're not even having to really pay for it. They do it for you.
Exactly.
Fantastic. And to finish up our conversation today, our audience is obviously senior level executives within the HR function. Final pieces of advice for them as they kind of move into this new HR universe that we're seeing with all of these changes.
Again, I always say things that might get me in trouble, but I would say be willing to unlearn what you've learned about your role. I mean, we have gotten conditioned to find study books and things, and we repeat the same things because it's easy to duplicate what we've already done. By nature, we look for the easy route to every destination. It's not hard, it's just different to be different. It's like, be willing to adapt, be willing to change, and recognize how, if you've seen the same thing, doing the same thing over and over, you have to change first before you convince others to change. And I know that's a hard thing to say because we have a lot of credibility in our titles, and nowadays titles don't matter. We all, no matter what size car you had, no matter how big your house was, people were stuck at home for a year, and we started thinking about our health and about our vulnerability and how fragile we really are, and the family we love. And, our limitations that we are so quickly, put into. Those are the true nature of humans. And I think if we tap into that for ourselves, we'll understand that we feel the same way everybody else feels. And don't use your title as a beacon, use your humanness as a beacon. And that will be the key to everything.
Beautifully said. Yeah, I think that's incredible. And really for leaders, not even just in the HR function, but across the board, I think you take that advice to heart. And really it's what we're seeing in the industry right now, and really the way forward, and what employees are looking for in their leaders and everyone that they want to work for. So absolutely. Incredible advice, Julian. Thank you so much for being here. This has been a fascinating conversation today, and I'm sure the audience will have more questions for you. Not to worry, there is a discussion forum underneath this presentation. Please be safe, be healthy, and enjoy the rest of the Connect HR Leadership Virtual Summit. Thank you.
Thank you.